Hi, everybody. Fitzdog Radio coming to you from Venice Beach, California, and it is Election Day. If you listen to this the day it comes out, get out to the polls. Try to protect the lives of unborn fetuses if you can. If you can't, fly somewhere you can. I wonder how many, oh, God. I've been feeling it. Like Michigan, I think is going to overturn it. There's a couple other places where abortion is going to get overturned. And California eventually will be the last place where you can get a decent abortion. And, you know, we've got tech. We've got the entertainment industry. We got cashews. And now abortions. Oh, yeah. Send them our way. I don't mean to make light of it, but get out and vote. And I don't care how you vote. Show up. Vote your heart, but show people you care. We're going out to dinner. If on Tuesday night we got about 8 of us going out to dinner, celebrating our friend Dave Rath, who we haven't seen in a while. I was just listening to Franz Ferdinand. Here's the thing. There's certain bands that I can't really tell the difference between. Like Franz Ferdinand, The Strokes, and The Killers, I realize are a trilogy. They're so fucking similar. And then, so I was thinking about other bands that are trilogies. Talking Heads, B-52s, and Devo. All kind of like art school bands from the late 80s who did conceptual music, but that also had a strong dance beat to it. Very similar. And then I'm not going to include like, I could say like Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and Temple of the Dog, but those are, I think they're all grunge bands from Seattle, right? So that doesn't count. Pixies, The Breeders, and The Replacements. Right? Right? I'm not saying... Look, this is not taking away from the originality or the brilliance of any of these, because these are all bands I love. I'm just saying they belong in a category together. Maybe they could tour together. Maybe I'll email their handlers. How about this one? Kansas, Boston, and Asia. Hey now. There you go. There's 3 bands I'd see. I'd pay to see that in a stadium. Just got back from San Francisco. Thanks to everybody for coming out to the Punchline, my second favorite club in the country. Truly. Could be my first, but I'm going to say my second. And great turnout. We packed all the shows. I worked with some really good acts, and my Dennis Gubbins came up and did a spot. He's from the San Francisco area. He was very nervous. I think he was a little high. I think he forgot some of his material, but his charm carried the day. He had a bunch of friends and family there. I think that's why he was so nervous. But it was great to see him. It was a good hang. My wife and daughter came up, and that was fun. My daughter, we had a code though. My daughter's 19. And she's seen it all. I mean, there's obviously at that age, kids at fucking 13 have already seen everything. But at 19, she's seen every type of stand-up comedy, and nothing's going to shock her. But I'm still her dad. And so I said to my wife, when I say things are about to get nasty, that's your guys' cue to take off. So I did about 2/3 of my act, and then I saved all the run. I wasn't going to do jokes about having sex with her mother in front of her. And which is basically what the last third of my act was. So I dismissed them at about 40 minutes in and then wrapped it out. But it was funny because my daughter's such a fucking wise ass. She has a fake ID. She's sitting at the bar of the club and she orders a drink with her fake ID. It's like, you're my daughter. They know who you are and they kind of know how old you are. Like, I could get fired. And I don't know how many drinks she had, but I think they comped it, whatever it was. We went to some nice dinners. We went to my favorite Chinese restaurant, House of Nanking. Shout out to Rob Dukes for reminding me to go there. Best Chinese food. It's in the Embarcadero. We went to City Lights Bookstore, which is the best bookstore in the country. It's the original where all the beat poets, I talked about it on a podcast at length last year, but go there. There's also a Vietnamese restaurant. I think it's called Saigon. It might just be called Saigon, but the most delicious, what do they call it? Pho? Pho. It's a bowl of soup, and it's like tangy. It's got tomato in it. It's a little hot and spicy, but it's also a little sweet. It's fucking so good. I love Vietnamese food. And it was like in this down and dirty place that makes you feel there's real Vietnamese people there. And it makes you realize, it makes you feel like you're in the right place. But yeah, great weekend. Thanks for coming out. You cannot offend a crowd in San Francisco. I don't know this misnomer that San Francisco is filled with snowflakes and everything's so PC. I think that's the club I do more outrageous shit in than any other club in the country because it's just so intimate. And I don't know, people are on board. Maybe it's just my crowd that comes out. Maybe I'm drawing people from the East Bay. But what else is going on? Did a big podcast with Bobby Kelly last week. That blew up pretty big. And Bill Burr sat in. Maybe that's why. But I think people also really are into Bobby Kelly. I finally watched his special. It's outstanding. Also, Ari Shaffir's special came out. Check that out on YouTube. It's very funny. I got a note from a guy named David. He said, regarding Father's Day being invented in Tacoma, I had to let you know that my father, who I've met once and have no relationship with, is from Tacoma and lives in Tacoma. And just an add-on, I've never been to Tacoma. Thanks for sharing, David. I was in Tacoma, and whenever I go to a town, I go on Wikipedia, I do my due diligence, I look up what's going on in this town, what's the history of the town, and it said that Tacoma is where they invented Father's Day. And so I wrote a bunch of jokes about it. I was joking about what a sad day it is if you have a deadbeat dad. You know, every other kid's playing catch and fishing, and you're like, I guess I'll watch The Outsiders again with my friends. Well, I had a bunch of Father's Day. Anyway, I'll remember that. I'll do them on Father's Day. Sorry, David, for dredging that up. My father died. My friend's father, Kevin Lynch from Pittsburgh, his father died on Father's Day. Mine died, I think, the week before Father's Day, which sucked because I hadn't talked to him in about 8 months. We'd had like a fight. And I always tell anybody that's not speaking to a family member, wrap that bullshit up. Even if you have to patch together a half-ass relationship, make some connection because you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen in life. And my biggest regret, you can't have regrets. One of the things that had made, I think, mourning him and getting over it so hard was that we had not spoken. And a lot of it had to do with his drinking. And then he actually quit drinking during that time. I'm not saying I made him stop drinking, but I think it was a factor. But I still should have kept my foot in the door somewhat. I don't know. Who knows? This one here's a quick overheard. This is from a guy who calls himself Extra Christie. Or maybe it's a woman. Oh, I guess it's a woman. Extra Christie. Very funny. Maybe the best. Oh, by the way, I guess Twitter is going to make me pay $8 a month for my blue check. I got to think about whether I'm going to make that investment or just get off Twitter entirely. I don't really do that much on Twitter anyway. And it's not that I don't have $8, but I don't know how I feel about a guy who's worth $500 billion making me pay him $8 so that to keep somebody from impersonating me. So I guess a bunch of people impersonated him this week. Sarah Silverman changed her handle to Elon Musk and then told people to vote against pro-lifers or something. I can't remember what, but she got banned from Twitter for doing it. So he's all about opening it up, but unless somebody's criticizing him, then they get through. It's a shit show. And I predict Twitter is going to fail. He's certainly going to lose a lot of money. It's not going well. He fired a lot of people, and now he's trying to hire them back. You guys all know the story. I can't do news because everybody's already read it. So Extra Christie said, maybe the best overheard ever. Hippie dude, head to toe in tie-dye at the Who concert. Quote, I'm not wavy gravy, but me and him went to the same clown school. Now, does that guy talk like that all the time? Because if he does, I want to find him and I want to rent the cabana behind his house. I just want to be around him and absorb all that he is until he dies, which won't be long because he's lived hard. Or was that like a saying that he heard in a song lyric and was regurgitating? I don't know. But if Wavy Gravy's a real guy, Extra Christie, I need you to track him down for me. And I need to take about a month off from everything and just take mushrooms and chill with Wavy Gravy. He's not Wavy Gravy, but he went to the same clown school. Tour dates coming up. Tampa, Florida. Side Splitters, great fucking room. November 17th to the 19th. Oklahoma City at the Rodeo Cinema, December 1st. Hyenas in Fort Worth, Texas, December 2nd and 3rd. And then just announced, first time I'm announcing it, Portland Helium Comedy Club, January 26th to the 28th. Get all your tickets at Fitzdog.com, or you can also pick up a premium membership for about 970 back episodes. Also, when you get that premium membership, and a lot of people took advantage of this in San Francisco, you get 2-for-1 tickets to the comedy show in your town. You just send me the receipt, and I comp you half your tickets. It's a nice deal, and it's cheap. The whole membership is like less than the cost of one comedy club ticket. All right, here we go. Fitzdog Radio is sponsored by BetterHelp, and BetterHelp is a great bunch of people that have put together a system of therapy where you just get online. It is a way of dealing with, a time in your life where you don't know how to handle it. Like you wish life came with a user manual, but it doesn't. So you got to kind of figure it out on your own. And there's people out there that can help you do that. Maybe you got a career change happening, a new relationship, any big life change. Maybe you got depression. I've got lifelong depression that I battle, and it is a fucking battle. And I don't know that I could do it without therapy. And I got hooked up with somebody from BetterHelp on the first try, which, by the way, if you don't jive with the person the first time, you switch right over to somebody else. It's great. They've connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, 100% online. So I strongly suggest this company. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists. Available 100% online, plus it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. Couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/Fitzdog. That's BetterHelp.com/Fitzdog. BetterHelp.com. Okay. Dig that. And also dig my conversation I had last week with my very good friend. She is a Los Angelino for life. She grew up in the business. Her father is George Carlin, and she has gone on to forge her own very creative path in this world. She got a degree from UCLA, and then she got another degree in Jungian psychology. She's a Buddhist. She's a very deep, interesting person. She's had a lot of experience producing stuff. She produced The Green Room with Paul Provenza. She's had a radio show on Sirius XM. She's got a book, A Carlin Home Companion, Growing Up with George, which I read, which was amazing. And she was just won an Emmy for producing George Carlin's American Dream with Judd Apatow. So we sat down last week and we had a nice talk. Unfortunately, the audio is just from the Zoom because the audio didn't. We had a glitch with the better audio, but it'll be fine. You'll love it. It's the quantity, not the quality, right? Is that what you say? All right, here we go. Here's Kelly Carlin. Ladies and gentlemen, coming back to Fitzdog Radio, a triumphant return. Once a decade, we do it. Right? Kelly Carlin. Was it that? I can't remember how long it was. I think it was probably at least 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, at least. It may have been a decade, actually. You're one of the earlier podcasts that I went on. My dad died in 2008, so it could have easily been 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you were doing a podcast then, but you probably were.
So catch me up. What have you done since then?
Well, gained 20 pounds, lost 20 pounds.
Are you a seesaw person with the weight?
I have been in the past, but I have found my jam. Of course, I gained 15 pounds in the fucking pandemic like everyone else did.
Right.
But I dropped them in January through March, April, done, dropped those, been keeping it off, no problem. I think once you hit a certain age, you're like, just get over yourself with this.
Right.
Just know what your fucking habits are, know what you need to avoid, and you'll be fine. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now.
Well, you look fantastic. I like your energy. You're very centered, always grounded. There's something about you that is very connected. It's nice.
Thank you. I think I came out that way. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that on the inside, but people have been telling me that my whole life. But
then you also went down that road. I mean, your life has sort of been an exploration of consciousness. You're a Jungian. You're a study of Jungian philosophy.
Yeah.
Buddhist. You've gone. What do you think led you down to exploring your soul so much?
I think I had really soulful parents who also did that. And it was always part of the conversation in some way. We didn't do religion.
Yeah.
So it was very, and I was born in 1963. So by the time I was 6 or 7, there had been a lot of LSD exploration in my family with my father, at least.
Right.
And my mom was always a seeker. And, I have like this memory of Ram Dass's Be Here Now book on our coffee table. Right. So there's my dad was, I think part of my dad's job was to like look around and say, what does all this mean? Right. So, and there was always this thing in my family about like, I think especially through my dad, was like he was always acknowledging and pointing out like weird synchronicities and stuff.
Yeah.
We would go to a hotel and we would get room 333 and 3 was our lucky number. And Dad would like, oh, look, we got 333, he'd be all jazzed about that. And I think as a kid, when your parents are like, you're really always watching, like, what are they watching? What are they curious about?
That is interesting because you think of a lot of families and, if they have religion, then they are born into believing a specific worldview. And you were born into deconstructing other people's worldviews. I mean, that's other people are born into families where you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday and, and you watch the Pirates in the spring. The sports becomes the paradigm that you live your life through. And with you, it's it could have sent you in a number of directions because it could have been very unsettling to be told nothing is as it appears and everything needs to be questioned. But yet it kind of resonated with you in a positive way. Yeah.
I think, my dad at an early age, my dad called me an old soul. And, and that kind of like, there's something, when you see a kid and we've all seen these ones, they're like, oh, that one's an old soul.
Yeah.
It's like they themselves have like come with more information or something, or perspectives that are wider and deeper than the average kid. There's a questioning already. And I think I just always felt in my bones, like there's gotta be more than just this. That's the way I think I've always lived my life, is there's gotta be more than just the surface stuff. And like you said, since my dad was kind of a deconstructor, he was instructing me in that very thing, which is what's underneath this?
Right.
What's behind this? So yeah, being a studier of the human unconscious through Jungian psychology, and then Buddhism is really the questioning of the reality that we've all agreed upon here, that like, what's the other level of consciousness that's beyond kind of our day-to-day ability to see and be.
Did Buddhism help you? Because Buddhism is so concerned with death and sort of working backwards from accepting it. Was that something that you had at the time of your father's death, or is that something that you found later? And with it, did it help you deal with both your parents' deaths?
Yeah, no, I had been dabbling in a lot of things in my 20s. My mom died when I was 34, I just turned 34. I've been, our whole family was dabbling in the New Age a lot. But Buddhism had always attracted me. And when my mother died, and I write about this in the book, and I used to talk about it in the solo show too, that there was this like, I always thought when my mom died, I was going to they were going to have to straitjacket me and put me at UCLA and put me on a lot of meds.
Yeah.
And what happened was kind of the opposite. This like incredible Zen space opened up in me, especially the week between her death and the memorial. And I like suddenly felt more grounded than I'd ever had. And I'd had an encounter with my mother. My dead mother came to me in the shower the day after she died. I'd never had anything like that happen.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, it was insane. She put her arms around me. I felt her arms, and she said to me, "You're going to be okay." And I felt like this strength entered my body in that moment. Like I was going to fall apart emotionally, but I wasn't going to go down. Like they were going to have to put me in a place. And I was at my parents' old house when this happened, and I ran into the other room and I told my dad what happened. And he was like, "Fuck, man, cool shit like that never happens to me." Like he was so jealous.
Yeah.
But this thing happened, and it was right after that I decided to go to my first Buddhist retreat. And I had dabbled in meditation, like 5 seconds of meditation here or there. I had like major anxiety disorders in my life and stuff. I was like, there's no way I could even stay in my body. And I decided to sign up for a 5-day Thich Nhat Hanh mindfulness meditation retreat in Santa Barbara, like 3 months after my mom died. And I went, and one of the things that attracted me to it was this sitting with death, sitting with what is, like whatever's coming up, and this really willingness to be in the face of reality. There was, that's the thing I love about that practice. It teaches you that you can actually be with the things that you're convinced you can't be with.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that reminds me of a line from the documentary. Congratulations, by the way, you won an Emmy this year for the documentary about your father.
Thank you.
And it's amazing. It's so well done, and I love how your voice comes through it. It personalizes it, and it's really great. But one of the lines in it was, I think, your father was talking about being challenged by new comedians that were coming along, Kinnison in particular, and that you either got cowered by that or you ran towards it. And in comedy, you embrace it. The thing that scares you, you go towards it.
Yes, it is exactly that. And it's the only way that we can actually, it's I guess really the choice then, right, is you're either running away from it or you're running towards it. And running towards it sounds scarier, but if you run away from it, it's still there. It's still going to catch you at some point. You're still going to have to deal with it. And at least if you're running towards it, you're kind of dealing with it on your own terms in some way.
Right. And it's amazing how it dissipates when you sit with it. When you have something that you run, and this is something that people who have trauma deal with EMDR, is that when you actually sit with trauma, it goes away. And you realize that, the energy was in the running from it.
Yes, the energy and the running from it doesn't let you, as like with trauma and EMDR and stuff like that, which is about letting your body mind process the images and the energy or whatever it is. You have to metabolize that stuff. And if you're always running away from it, your unconscious will be offline metabolizing it for you. And therefore you get all of those symptoms. You get the depression, the panic, the nightmares, the somatic experience, whatever it is. And that's why I just find the Jungian stuff and all of the depth psychology stuff so fascinating, because it is about learning to be in conscious conversation with your unconscious and letting enough of it come into the conscious space so that you can be in relationship with it. And like you said, the minute you're in conscious relationship with it, it's like dust. It's like it disintegrates. It's like a cloud that goes into wispiness.
Right. And it's like what you said, you're somatically, you're physically, you're doing all the work, you're taking the beating, but you got to tap your mind and go, hey, we're working on this over here. You've resolved this. You don't have to keep playing it over and over and over again and running from it.
Yes. And it is that connection between ego, conscious mind, hey, I'm working on it, and the body that works in this more mysterious, unconscious way. And it's something about connecting those two dots together, where then it's like, oh, now there's an actual loop or something where it's not running its own show, that it's looping through it. And then maybe the symptoms come up again and you go, oh, that's right. That's anxiety. That's me needing to process more grief or more fear. It's the grieving process is a trauma in it itself. It's how we manage the loss, right? And it's such a great thing if you can learn to grieve fully. It's a shit show. It's a roller coaster. It's not fun. But if you come out of that process, I think, a transformed person.
Well, I guess I don't know a ton about Buddhism, but that's the one that I took one class in it in college. And that's that's the main book, right? The Book of Dying. Is that what it's called?
The Book of the Dead. Yeah,
the Book of the Dead.
And it's about the process of of helping someone move through all of that as they're dying even.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do you feel like you processed your father dying versus how you dealt with it when your mother passed?
It's such a great question. And I'm actually just starting to sit down and starting to write about this because this is what I want my next piece out in the world to be about. And, you know, first of all, they're two very different people, very different parents. Your mother and your father, very different experiences for both of us. And then in my case, way different. My mom, it was like a wrenching of a part of my body had been ripped away. So I felt a deep amount of physical pain from the grief and the loss. And she had been the person that I had been most worried about her dying since I was probably 4 years old because of her alcoholism.
Yeah.
So I think it'd been a long kind of terror around that. And so it was a long grieving. And I really let myself feel it all and move through it. And it took years to really kind of really move through it big time and not feel like on the anniversaries, like completely torn apart and ripped apart by it. Whereas my dad, it was so weird because my mom and I talked on the phone every day. My dad and I spoke or saw each other. We spoke on the phone maybe every few weeks. We saw each other maybe every 6, 7, 8 weeks. Busy man that he was. I was pretty busy. That's just kind of the pace of our relationship. And then, so he wasn't in my consciousness much. He was just my dad. He was off doing his thing. I was off doing mine. Every once in a while, I'd encounter him in the culture or something like that, or be like, oh, there's my dad just walked in the room as, you know, a poster somewhere or something, you know. We didn't have social media, all that kind of stuff. And then he died. And because I'm an only child, I became the one, I was in relationship with him 24/7 after he died.
Right.
I mean,
that's very different than your mom. With your mom, it was a little more personal. It was your own mourning.
It was
whereas
my own grief and no one except for her close friends, and I could process grief with them.
Right.
And then, like, you know, 5, 6 months after my dad died, Facebook was a thing. Twitter was a thing. So now I'm like, and of course, I chose this too. Like, I get it. Like, I could have disappeared and not been my father's face or voice in the culture, not do interviews about him, not help with publicizing a book that came out, or we did the Mark Twain Prize was the first thing that happened after he died. He knew about it, but it was like, November, we're going to Washington and we're going to go honor him in public.
Right.
So my dad became this constant figure in my day, which was weird. But I didn't personally grieve my dad until I would say about 6 years ago.
Because you were busy. You were representing, which is a labor of love. I mean, I guess it was one of the ways you were manifesting your love for him was to be 100%. The face and protect the legacy.
And protect the legacy, be the face, and even in doing my solo show, I was working out our relationship and working out our story together and, you know, getting such beautiful guidance and support from people like Paul Provenza and Gary Shandling, like, who really helped me emotionally and psychologically walk through all of that to help me make this piece of art, this craft of, you know, the storytelling thing. But I was busy kind of working all of that out. And then finally, when my book came out in 2015 and I was pretty much done with the show and the book by 2016-ish, is really when it was like, oh, that's done. And then the void showed up a little bit more. Yeah. It was like, oh, now I've got to go turn towards my just being a daughter and missing my dad.
Right. And renegotiate. I mean, being an only child who loses both parents, that's tough. That's a lonely place to come from. And I can see why you were busying yourself with other things rather than sitting with the fact that I'm an orphan with no siblings. That's heavy. I mean, not to dump that on you, but that occurred to me when he died. I thought about you and I was like, wow, that's a very lonely place.
Yeah. And we were the Three Musketeers. This is part of our story, you know? And so, yeah, it's like, who am I without them? You know? Yeah. So there's that. And I think that's really what I was working out in the narrative of everything is, you know, who was I with them? And therefore then who am I without them? And of course, because of social media, like his fans, like I felt like the fans were, and the comics too, was like this beautiful web of like light and love that like, it was my family. You know, my dad had always said, because my dad too, like had his brother, had his mom, he was a latchkey kid, also kind of felt like a solo in many ways. He was in many ways. And we didn't have a big family ever. And he used to say, and kind of get tears in his eye was when he would talk about it, like I know I can go to any city or town in America and someone would know me and take me in.
Yeah.
And that's the way it felt for me. I felt like suddenly I had all these brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts who, you know, my dad's fans always said like, he's my Uncle George. I just have always felt like that's how close I am with him. He's my Uncle George. And so I had to like get okay with that.
Yeah.
And really see the beauty of it. Like,
right. Because it can be a violation. I mean, if you're somebody who, I mean, we all want possession of our parents. Yeah. It's a very primal drive as a young child is to want to possess your parents and then to have to share them with so many people who, insert themselves into his life and then your life is it's a lot. And the thing I also think about with you is that like you, in a way, are always going to be seen as a kid. Because you're the child Greg. Of somebody famous, you're a kid.
I can't tell you. I am 59 years old. I cannot tell you the people who call me kiddo.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it is, and they're 20 years younger than me.
It'll keep you young. It's great.
Oh my God. And yet, a part of me, it like keeps me also like infantilized in some ways too. You know, it's like, I'm sorry. I need to own my fucking wisdom here and my own seat at the table and my own adulthood. I mean, that's really what I've been spending the last 4 years on is like doing a hell of a lot of adulting that I never did before. In areas like money and, you know, all that kind of adulting responsibility stuff. And I'm like, I fucking earned my adultness.
Yeah. Well,
but you're right, Greg. People do see me as the kid.
As the kid. Yeah. We're similar. I had in a much smaller scale, I had a similar dynamic growing up because my father was he was one of the biggest radio guys in New York. He was on WNEW and he was pretty famous. And so like when we walked into a Mets game or a bar on the Upper West Side, it was always like, hey, Fitz, like everybody knew him. And I know what it's like to be the kid. And even now when I see my father's friends, like they'll never see me as a grown up. And my father was an alcoholic. He died of a heart attack he was 52. And I can relate to so much of your experience, but the biggest thing that I can relate to, I'm putting this on you, but I just know that how I feel. And I think infantilized is a really good description of it, that I'll never feel grown up. Or I shouldn't say that. I'm struggling to feel grown up.
Yeah, and it really is contextualized that way. And and it's fine. Like friends of my dad or peers of my dad, I get that. And even maybe someone who's younger than me that is a peer of my dad, in the comedy world, I totally get all of that. And a part of me, needed that right after he died. I needed a lot of uncles and brothers and people like that. I think that, one of the things I want to write about and talk about is how kind of like Paul and Gary especially kind of refathered me in very specific ways that my father couldn't do for me.
Prevents and Gary Shandling?
Yeah, because of just how much time they spent with me and how vulnerable and raw I got with them around, learning my craft and shaping the show and they each kind of, and even Lewis Black too, they each kind of healed an aspect of my relationship with my dad that was just not going to happen with my dad and I, not even because he left early, but just because it wasn't the nature of our relationship. It wasn't he didn't put on the normal fathering role in a lot of ways because he didn't have a father, didn't really know how to do that. And he was so laissez-faire with me because his mom was such a narcissist, controlling woman that he was like, I am not going to do this to my kid no matter what. And there was a part of me that I've really gotten in touch with lately, which is I really wanted him to take me under his wing and say, here's how you do it, kiddo. Here's how you work on, even if I'm not going to be a stand-up, but here's how you start to inch into your art form or your craft. And here's what you're going to feel about it. And this is what it's going to, this is what's going to maybe happen. And this is how you pick yourself back up. Got none of that from him.
Yeah.
So it was a really beautiful family that did gather. Like all the pieces that gathered around me were exactly what I needed in the moment, for sure.
And what did you glean from Gary? What do you remember having affected your life from your relationship with Gary Shandling?
Well, immediately he was the first person that I could admit to, besides my husband and my therapist, that a part of me, the artist part of me that had been in the shadow and kept my mouth closed, was relieved that my father was gone because there was more room on the planet for me.
Wow.
And, that was within a month of my dad's death. I could already feel that the freedom that everyone feels when a parent dies, we've all felt it. The minute even my mom died, it was she didn't have the same shadow, but there's there's some part of me that doesn't need to take care of her anymore. And so I'm free to kind of do whatever it was that I was kind of hiding in order to make her feel better, to feel okay. We all make these negotiations with our parents. And for my dad, there was this tacit thing around there's really only room for one Carlin on a stage at a time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing about Gary too was that, which nobody knew until Judd made the documentary, unless you were friends with Gary, was that he was very much a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's mindfulness meditation. And he was very much a part of that community and that learning. And so he and I talked a lot about the struggle of ego and watching the ego grasp onto outcome and grasp onto attention and all of that as an artist, as a performing artist, especially. Mm-hmm. And he was really experimenting with how to go on stage and not be attached to the outcome while at the same time being a comedian who has to be attached to the outcome on some level because you want to make people laugh.
Right. And that is That's a slippery slope. And it's a slope that I saw Gary go down, because there were times where I really felt like saying, Gary, you have to take in the audience a little bit more. Like he would do sets sometimes at the Comedy Magic Club where he was just reading stuff off a pad that clearly were musings, they were spiritual, or they were, and it wasn't landing, and he wasn't closing strong. And he's one of my favorite comics of all time. But I think that brilliant. Sometimes he lost that connection to meeting the audience. And I think it's something that Kamau Bell in the documentary talks about, your father not needing the laugh all the time. And I think especially the further he went into his career, the less he was dependent on laughs per minute and keeping the audience, as opposed to, I think Kamau said, you have to have a stiff back. You have to be able to absorb that they're going to be quiet sometimes, especially as he got into more long form comedy later in his life, that you could go a minute without even attempting a laugh. And to live with that, that's really taking the art form and stretching it out and expanding it.
Yeah. I mean, then it becomes more like true, pure oratory.
Yeah.
Which is something my dad said in the documentary too, like this, ultimately it is that art form, right? Especially for him, he was always building on a thesis of some kind and bringing people into that to be swayed by his argument. And so, yes, he did. And for some people, he didn't balance it well. For some people, it was like, yeah, it needs to be all funny.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, his stance very dark, and people wrestle with that. And I love Stephen Colbert in the documentary. He was like, yeah, he lost me at the end. Sorry,
Yeah.
But that says so much about Stephen Colbert too. Each of us have our own thing. But yeah, I think Gary was trying to move through a phase in his life and figure out who he was. And he was kind of tired of being churned through, doing his TV shows took everything out of him. And he was trying to find a way to stay centered and be at peace and still be in the game and still be participating in his art form. And because when I met him, he was in that struggling mode, and he and I would talk a lot about that. Like, when is it too much of just the being on stage? And when do you have to really serve up what the audience is really there for?
Yeah.
You've made a contract with the audience by being there.
And also the thing that makes you effective as a comedian usually didn't have a great origin story. I mean, for me, it was the dinner table. And if my dad wasn't laughing, I was nothing. And if he gave me a big laugh, I felt love. And so that's what brought me to the stand-up stage to begin with. So for me to try to replace that neediness and that immediate gratification with, here's an idea. Like, I love in the documentary how all of his jokes start with the genesis of, like you said, it's a theme. It's like, society versus, this, or religion versus this. And he would write something on a scrap of paper, and that's where the joke started. It didn't, not all of them. Some of his jokes started with, something very silly and something very visceral. And then other jokes were clearly like, here's an arena I want to work in. And then he found ways to take big ideas and get them across. I think what's actually, I gotta also apologize. You invited me to a dinner I couldn't make it to. Not a dinner. What did you do with George Schlatter at the Comedy Store?
Yeah, they did a lovely afternoon event where they just honored him, and Lily was there, and Goldie Hawn, and Bill Maher showed up and honored him too.
That's nice.
Quite amazing. It was really heartfelt and beautiful. And it was a chance for us at the National Comedy Center to invite some of his friends and some people to get to know us too, because it's an important thing in my life. It's how I'm really forwarding my father's legacy in a very concrete way. But it was just a beautiful celebration of George and the impact he had on these people's lives and television in general and comedy.
Yeah, afternoon is what threw me. I got dressed, I took a shower, and I'm heading out the door at around 6:30, and then I look at the invite, it says 3 to 6. I'm like, who the fuck has an event from 3 to 6? Even Bill Maher figured it out.
He did somehow.
So tell me about the National Comedy Center in Jamestown. I know that they have is that sort of where you're showcasing a lot of your dad's stuff? Is there like an exhibit there for your dad?
Yes. So what happened about 7 years ago, or about 6 years ago, is 7. I donated about 90% of what I had here of my dad's stuff. And the reason I did that was, I went and met them. I saw Jamestown. They'd already raised 30 of the $50 million that they needed to build the place.
No.
It is a state of the art. It's one of them. It's been voted by other museums and other things like this, like the best museum in America, one of the best attractions. It is an incredibly innovative, technologically innovative place. It's a nonprofit. And their whole job is based on Lucille Ball, who was born in Jamestown, New York. Her vision, they wanted to build a museum for her. There is a little Lucy museum there, but Lucy's vision was, don't make this about me. Make it about comedy. Make it about this art form that no one else bothers to care about. And so I went there and met the people on the board. They're not New Yorkers. They're not LA people. They're not entertainment industry people. They are salt of the earth, really, really smart people, really, really get it, love comedy, visionaries. The whole region, they raised the money mostly regionally. And the state got behind them, some big, couple big people. But I knew once I met all of them and it felt legit. I'd met about 2 or 3 other people who were building things like this. It was not legit at all.
Yeah.
They walked me through it all. They explained it all, how it was going to work. It was an incredible vision. And I knew that if I could donate my dad's stuff to some like academic institution, I don't know which one he did. He kind of left all of them. He didn't have it. Right. And then there's always the dream of like, oh, the Smithsonian, that would be beautiful. And then I immediately thought of the end of fucking Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they put the Ark in a box in like some warehouse. And I'm like, that's what's going to happen to my dad's stuff there.
Right.
And having lived already for about 7 years with my dad's fans and knew how loyal, voracious people were still consuming his stuff. They wanted to be in relationship with them. I'm like, it has to be a place where they can interact with it. They can be with it. They can be a part of his story. And this is what they promised me. And so he's got the only permanent exhibit there because I was the first domino from the comedy world that said yes. And they really wanted to honor that in and of itself. But the rest of the place, here's the deal. You walk in, there's a kiosk. It asks you, what's your favorite stand-ups? What's your favorite comedy movies? What's your favorite comedy shows, books, podcasts, blah, blah, blah. You pick all these things. And now it spits out a little bracelet with a computer chip on it that has your algorithm of your sense of humor. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Then you walk through the museum. There's 2 different things that are going on in the museum. There's either interactive, different genres or mediums. So you're going in, you're looking at sitcoms, stand-up, improv, late night, movies, comics, writer's room. There's a blue room, just podcasts, everything. And when you walk up to them, you put your little bracelet onto the thing and it says, oh, hi, Greg, I see you're a fan of, and then it'll show you some things that. But if you're in the stand-up room, it's gathering everyone's information. And it's like, oh, there's 4 people here who love Richard Pryor. Hey, it looks like a lot of you love Richard Pryor. And then you kind of look around and go, hey, yeah, we're all Pryor fans. This is great. So there's a sense of community. You're laughing your fucking ass off and it easily takes 2 days to go through there. Like you can only do like 2 or 3 hours at a time. but you're going through every genre like that. You're having this experience, you're laughing your ass off. And then there's like these other interactive things that are like, you know, make your friend laugh or do this or do that. And there's like comedy karaoke. They've got like, I don't know, 1,000 routines in there. You look up your favorite comic, a 2-minute routine pops up. You get to watch the video, read the thing. You go up, there's a bar there so everyone can get a little fucking, you know, tipsy. And you go up and
get out of here.
I swear to God, it's the most fun thing in the world.
That's amazing.
All amazing. You go down into the blue room. So that's like where it's like the, you know, the rated R room for people. Lenny Bruce's trench coat is in the blue room.
Wow.
It's like going to, you know, like your favorite pilgrimage. It's like going to Lourdes or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. They've done every single comic who's walked through it is blown away, is completely blown away. I've never met a civilian that's gone in there who hasn't been blown away by this experience. It takes a weekend to go through. There's something for everybody, kids, adults, the whole thing.
I love that it's not in LA or New York, because then it really is like a focused reason you're going. Because who else is going to Jamestown, New York?
Not only that, but it was modeled after Cooperstown because of that. And they did a huge viability, like, you know, you don't raise $50 million on like, hey, maybe it'll work. Like it's where it is. It's like, it's near 60 million people in America. You know, it's near Cleveland, it's near Pittsburgh, it's near Buffalo, it's near, you know, all these places. And people drive through this area to go to Niagara Falls all summer long. You know, it's this huge corridor, and it's just fantastic. And so, you know, part of the reason we did that event is because I just want to tell the comedy world, I know it's hard to get to fucking Jamestown, New York. I get it. You have to fly through Buffalo or some shit like that, but come, because it's fantastic. And it's beautiful there. Lake Chautauqua's right there, which is like this huge lake. It's freaking gorgeous, you know? And so for me, it gave me a place to like get behind, know my dad's stuff is safe. Their archivist is this incredible woman. She's an incredible archivist. She majored in archiving. She minored in comedy in college. Like like this job was built for this woman.
Right.
She's so good that when I sent her all the stuff, or when they took all the stuff away, she unpacked it. My dad, because of his organizational brain, you know, had his own way of organizing his material.
Yeah.
She said to me, the way your dad archived his material will not be undone, because it says more about his mind than anything I could ever do as an archivist.
Yeah.
And I thought, this woman gets it.
Yeah. That's awesome. And for you, it's so interesting for you because, like, you know, during your life and after, during your father's life and after it, and I, you know, as a comedian who has children, I sort of wanted to ask you about what it's like to have, because Springsteen was just on Howard Stern yesterday. Did you hear that interview?
I do not listen to Howard Stern.
Okay. So, so he was on, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it was Howard Stern, but Springsteen was talking about his kids seeing him perform in a stadium.
Yes.
And the desire to show your child what you do and who you are, but at the same time, how it fucks with your kid's head, because that's a different person than the kid who you want, the father you want to take you for an ice cream or to just help you with your homework or whatever. And I had my son see me for the first time a few years ago, and he came to the Denver Comedy Works, which is one of the best clubs in the country. And it was a Saturday night, early show, packed. And I went on, and I mean, I crushed because I knew he was out there. I prepped for it. I felt the energy of it. And then afterwards, I went out with him for a slice of pizza, and he was gushing to me about how funny it was and how amazed he was. And I felt cheap. I felt like he was just like somebody else who saw me do stand-up and was a fan. It was weird.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I could totally see that, because what your relationship was when he was in the audience and you were on the stage was he was an audience member and you were the entertainer. And so it was on that level. And it's interesting because, and how old is your kid?
He's 22 now, but this was when he was about 17.
Okay.
The first time he saw me live.
That's late. I mean, I was seeing my dad live when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and he was on TV first, obviously. And so for me, it's so interesting because I always felt this huge rush of pride around the impact he was having on the audience.
Yeah.
And that people were so excited to see him. And when I was little in the 70s, there'd be a lot of chanting and foot stomping. It was like very rock and roll concert-y kind of before the shows. But the thing I loved that I would always say to my dad, it would never be about a piece or something like that. I mean, I was always watching on two levels. As audience member, letting his stuff wash over me and just take it in and be blown away by it and laughing. But there was always these moments where it would be an aside he would throw away or an awkward transition moment. But it was usually in these like throwaway asides that wouldn't get a big laugh, but I would laugh at because it's the humor that he and I share.
Right.
In a very
like
particular
vulnerable?
just a particular way that things that we find funny that maybe not everyone else does. But
right.
Maybe I inherited it. Maybe I just got it because he did. I don't know. And I would say something about that thing, like, you know, oh, I love that thing where you just threw in the da-da-da-da about the thing.
Yeah.
And we would just both get this glint in each other's eye, like, I get you and you get me moment kind of a thing.
Yeah. But it throws off, the power structure in a way, because like, I think I tried to be the kind of father that wasn't domineering. I never wanted, like, my father just intimidated the shit out of me. He was 6'3" from the Bronx, tough, you know, he was fun and he was funny and he was the life of the party. But when he got angry, it was scary. And I just never wanted to have that dynamic with my son. I didn't want to be his friend. I always figured I got my friends, you got your friends, but I wanted to have a relationship that was open and trusting and not patriarchal. And so I think stand-up is very patriarchal. It's very like, you shut up, you respect me, you know? And I felt like it was unfair to him that I put him through that. And that he liked it. That he liked it through me. It wasn't what I expected at all. And so I was just curious, like, if you ever experienced that same thing, if you felt like he was using that as a power. Because in a way, it's not being vulnerable to you.
No, but you know, it is interesting you bring this up. I thank you for bringing this up because it's really feeling into that. One of the things that first of all, I just love that you said it's patriarchal, because I've always tried to figure out the dynamic of it. And you're right. My dad used to say, you're here for me. I'm here for me. No one's here for you. And that used to just so cringy inside of me, because my dad in person was such a present, generous, relatable guy. But it's a patriarchal art form. And the other thing is that the version of my dad and his opinions on stage, I always felt, well, he would say, of course, that they were always spiced up to be more theatrical and dramatic, right? You have the full toolkit at your disposal to like emphasize certain words and rhythm a certain way and to build the joke in a way that then the laugh comes, right? You have to construct things in a very particular way. And so I used to think like, some of it was a bit histrionic, a bit black and white, a bit much,
Yeah.
But he would say, well, I believe everything I say on stage. But it would be like, yeah, but if I was having a conversation with you about this, the tone would be very different.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be an exchange of ideas. There'd be a whole other space here. And so I think what happened to me, Greg, is I internalized a bit of my father's patriarchal know-it-all from the stage and used that as kind of the thing that I would kind of have to live up to or have to live against or have to convince, or like that became the father figure in my head more than my real dad with the big heart and the soft eyes.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Actually.
Yeah. Well, it is. I mean, it is true, because there's something that, as truthful as your father was, it still has to be presented in a way that's manipulative. I mean, stand-up comedy, like any theater, like any art, is produced for effect.
Yes.
And and it's like I can remember both my parents are storytellers. They're both Bronx Irish drunks that tell great stories. And they tell the same ones over and over again, and they get better every time. There's always a new detail. There's always something that I know is not true that they added to it. And on one level, I was so enamored by my parents that they could go into a party with strangers and hold court. They could just captivate. And at the end of the night, everybody's hugging my mother. Everybody remembers my mother. And my mother was full of shit. She was lying.
This is my father's mother. This is my father's mother. I can so relate, Greg.
Right. And so I loved them for it, but it also made me like stand back a little bit and go like, hey, this isn't real. Yeah. But then you go, well, what's real? They just created a bunch of love and laughter. And isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
But
it's, and this is the whole thing too about the watching the parent on a stage also, is that, and watching the reaction of the audience, because then that becomes what counts and what's real in your head. And part of that is that part of you also that you talked about earlier, which I think is so true of all of us performers, is, if you're a performer, you are tap dancing to get love and approval. Like whatever your art form is, you want to see smiles and you want to see applause. Like you're doing it for the show of it. It's show off time. And I think for me, because there was no chance for me to be on that stage, or I didn't feel worthy of it, or whatever that dynamic was for me growing up, or there was no room for me on it. But I longed also for that. Like I have that in me too. I'm a show off too. And so I would do skits at home, and I, went dance and all that kind of stuff. But I could never bring it to public while my dad was alive. And so I think what it shapes in the kid's head is that, oh, whatever I do isn't as valuable or as important or not even impactful in some ways, and no matter what your parents says to you. But my parents both said to me all the time, you're so smart, you're so gifted, you can do whatever you want. And I would think, meh.
Yeah, right. I mean, that is, and you've spent your life finding a way to get out of that shadow and to feel empowered to put out a book and a one-person show and a radio show, and all the things you've done, you've had to do despite the fact that, let's be honest, you're not going to be as famous as your father. You're not going to get the accolades of your father, but to find a way to still make it meaningful to you and know that you're going to bring something that he couldn't. You're going to bring something that in a way might be more raw, more vulnerable.
Yeah. I mean, I knew right away that I I did storytelling while my dad was still alive, and I knew that I brought that to the stage, and I also knew that that wasn't his jam. He wasn't that kind of a comic anyway. He wasn't Richard Pryor. He was George Carlin. They're two very different human beings on that stage. Richard would, open up his guts on a stage, and be totally vulnerable while being brilliantly, geniusly funny. And the thing was, though, is that the one thing that I knew that I wanted, though, was that experience of what happens when you are on a stage and you are shaping the energy in the room through what you're saying and how the audience is receiving it. Whether you're a storyteller and you're being funny or you're opening up their hearts, that is a powerful experience to be in that exchange with people. And to learn your craft enough, like you said earlier, that it's ultimately is manipulation, all art is, to learn it enough where you know how to open a heart or know how to build a joke to break the tension, and the incredible high of getting to play in the collective energetic sandbox of humanity. That's the thing I love to do.
And it may be manipulations and tools and tricks, but within that, you then introduce on your father's case, it was more that he introduced intellectual ideas.
Yes.
Whereas in somebody else's case, like yours, it might be introducing some emotional.
Yes. And for me, it's always about wanting to make everything I do. I want the audience to understand that whatever they've been through or they're feeling or struggling with, that they're just another human being like me struggling with that. And so that's why I love bringing my vulnerability to the space, because it's not to be taken care of by anybody or anything like that. It's not self-indulgent in that way. It's more like, hey, we're all fucking struggling here, trying to figure this shit out. I happen to be on the stage with the spotlight on me right now, but trust me, I'm with you in the trenches also. And I really try to use whatever I'm talking about or experiencing to at least empower other people to not feel alone, and to empower other people to see there is a breadcrumb path through depression or anxiety or losing a parent or whatever it is I'm talking about.
Right. Well, Kelly, you're a gift. I love having you on. We have to do this way more often than once a decade.
Oh my God. I agree. This has been so much fun. And it's great. It's absolutely great. I'm so excited we get to talk about these kind of things. And you gave me some big insights today too. So I'm super excited.
Oh, good. It's nice to hear that. That's all I'm trying to do. It's all I'm trying to do on Fitzdog Radio. Give out some insights.
I love it.
But I want you to check out the George Carlin's American Dream, which you won an Emmy for. It's a love letter to your. It's not a love letter. It's a very honest, in-depth, layered. It's a very layered look at your father. It shows a lot of sides to him, and I think that it must have taken great pains for you to go to some of those places and Jay in good hands with Judd Apatow and Michael Bonfiglio.
They hit it out of the park. I want to tell the listeners here, I had zero to do with it content-wise. I gave it up to Judd and Mike. They went off. I did a rough cut, gave them some notes, very few notes, just to make sure that some things really were clear. But they're the ones who saw that. Well, I watched the rough cut and I was like, oh my God, I'm really in this thing.
Yeah.
But so I just want people to know I didn't orchestrate any of this, that they did it. I agree. I think it's a great 360-degree view of my dad. And I'm just so proud that we done good by him.
Well, you did. You certainly did. I don't know a comedian that watched it that did not rave about it. So thank you on behalf of all of us for putting that out there forever.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. God bless you too, darling.